So we talk a lot about YouTube boxing on this channel. However, today I thought I would switch it up a bit and work on a different type of video from what you're normally used to. Of course, from the title, we're going to be looking into the original Spider-Man trilogy from the early 2000s that was directed by Sam Raimi. Personally, I'm very fond of this trilogy and have a lot of nostalgia for it. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to watch these films as a child, even though I wasn't really supposed to be, considering these movies were rated PG-13. All I remember was my family and I were shopping one day in our local mall, and my parents bought me the Spider-Man 2 film, not knowing it was a PG-13 movie. I did know of Spider-Man as this cartoon superhero on television, but I never really looked into them much other than watching these movies. I believe I was only 5 or 6 at the time, so really I grew up watching more kid-friendly movies and shows, mostly Disney Pixar, CGI animated films, etc. However, I was lucky enough to also watch these films as a child, as this would mark a very memorable part of my childhood. I remember watching Spider-Man 2, loving it so much that I wanted to get the first one too. Yes, I watched the second movie before the first as a child. I eventually got that also on DVD and loved both of the movies, but mainly I was more of a fan of the sequel, and of course we'll get into that later into this review. Today, of course, I'm going to be reviewing all these 3 Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. The first one, the second, and the third, and I just want to give my honest review on all of them. A lot of people have mixed feelings about this trilogy. Some adore it just because of the nostalgia, while others think the later Spider-Man movies are way better. Of course, my opinions will probably not be the same as everyone's. Some people like the Tobey Maguire movies, some like the Garfield, some the Holland fans. That's not really a debate in this video, but maybe for a future video we'll see what happens. I just mainly want to talk about what I think about these movies and give my overall analysis and personal opinions. You guys can also leave in the comments your thoughts on this trilogy, and all opinions are welcomed. Anyways, with all that being said, let's get into reviewing the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Spider-Man 1. This is where it all began. The film released on May 3rd, 2002, literally in the same year I was born, which is crazy to think about since I also grew up with these movies. The movie begins with Peter Parker, a nerdy high school student living in Queens, New York, living with his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Peter has a crush on his next-door neighbor, Mary Jane Watson, but he's too shy to tell her. During a school field trip to a genetics laboratory, Peter is bitten by a genetically engineered spider. The next morning, he wakes up to find that he has developed spider-like abilities, including super strength, enhanced reflexes, and the ability to cling to walls. He also at one point no longer needs his glasses, and does develop a more muscular physique. Peter initially uses his powers to make money by participating in a wrestling match, so he can win a car to impress Mary Jane Watson. He has a wrestling match with the infamous Bonesaw, and this would be the debut of Spider-Man, but in a more simplistic costume. He wins the match, but is cheated out of his winnings by the promoter. The promoter would only give him $100 when the ad said $3,000, but Peter only took him out in 2, and the ad said 3, which I feel he should have had a bonus for finishing him early, but I digress. Frustrated, Peter lets a thief who robs the promoter escape. Tragically, the same thief would later kill Uncle Ben during a carjacking. Peter finds Uncle Ben dead, and has his last few words with him before he passes away. Peter, devastated by his uncle's death, realizes that he must use his powers responsibly, and adopts the persona of Spider-Man to fight crime in his city. Meanwhile, Norman Osborn, the father of Peter's best friend Harry, is head of Oscorp, a major scientific corporation. Under pressure to secure a military contract, Norman tests an unstable performance-enhancing chemical on himself. The experiment gives him superhuman strength and intelligence, but also drives him insane, turning him into the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin begins a reign of terror in New York City, and Spider-Man becomes his primary target. The two engage in several battles, with the Green Goblin trying to convince Spider-Man to join him. Peter refuses, leading to a fierce rivalry between them. As Spider-Man, Peter saves Mary Jane multiple times, and she begins to develop feelings for his masked alter ego, not knowing he is Peter. Meanwhile, Harry Osborn starts dating Mary Jane, creating tension between him and Peter. In the beginning of the movie, Harry tried making a move on her to begin with. The Osborns, Aunt May, MJ, and Peter all have a dinner. Norman shows up late, of course, after having his battle with Spider-Man. Peter will eventually come, but during the dinner, Aunt May notices that Peter has a cut. Norman also glances and then figures out that that was the same cut he gave Spider-Man. Norman storms out and eventually finds out that Peter is Spider-Man. All hell breaks loose when the Green Goblin starts to terrorize everything that Peter loves. He would pretty much send Aunt May into the hospital, giving her a heart attack of some sort. She would end up being okay, but Peter was there to comfort her. Mary Jane would also come to visit Aunt May, and started to form feelings for Peter from that point. Harry and MJ would break up, and Harry would of course tell his father. Since Green Goblin was already trying to seek his revenge on Spider-Man, he kidnaps both Mary Jane and a tram car full of children, forcing Spider-Man to choose between saving her or the children. Peter manages to save both, but it would not be that easy. This would lead to a final confrontation between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. During the fight, Norman reveals his identity to Peter and pleads for mercy. Of course, Peter sorta knew that Norman was the Green Goblin, but just wanted to confront him. While talking to him, he tries to father him and make things right, while also secretly trying to impale Peter with his glider. Peter senses the attack with his spider senses, and dodges, causing the glider to impale Norman instead. Norman, dying, asks Peter not to reveal his identity to Harry. Peter takes Norman's body back to his home, where Harry actually sees Spider-Man, and believes that Spider-Man killed his father, vowing revenge. The movie ends with Peter attending Norman's funeral. Harry said some words to Peter saying that Spider-Man will pay, and then shares a hug with Peter. Mary Jane and Peter would also have a conversation, where she starts to admit that she loves Peter and wants to be with him. However, Peter declines as he wants to protect the ones he loves, and he can't risk losing her just like he lost Uncle Ben. The movie ends with Peter swinging through the city, embracing his role as a hero, and fully aware of the sacrifices it entails. Now, my overall thoughts. I think this film is a great start to the trilogy. It was a great introduction to the universe and the characters. The origin story of Spider-Man and Peter Parker, learning about responsibility and what it means to be a true hero. Definitely Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn stole the show with some of his iconic lines and scenes, as well as his acting was really good in this film as well. Uncle Ben's death was definitely tragic too, just based off the last interaction he did have with Peter, but then Peter just finding his uncle dead on the streets of New York. It definitely was heartbreaking. Uncle Ben's death would start to really become a big thing throughout these next few movies, which we will get into later in this video. This movie also has a lot of iconic lines too. One of them being when Peter was wrestling Bonesaw and said this to him.
"That's a cute outfit. Did your husband give it to you?"
Which didn't really age well and was cut from some releases of the film, most notably on TV broadcasting. Some other stuff like Norman Osborn saying such lines like,
"You know, I'm something of a scientist myself."
Back to formula.
I started this company. You know how much I sacrificed?
J.K. Simmons really nailed the character of J. Jonah Jameson, showing a loud and annoying, yet comedic side to him. He's personally one of my favorite characters from this trilogy. He has such a dislike for Spider-Man, makes really negative headlines about him, but it's delivered in a very comedic way.
If we can get a picture of Julia Roberts in a thong, we can certainly get a picture of this weirdo.
There was actually a scene where he was confronted by the Green Goblin, since his company takes pictures of Spider-Man. He doesn't tell the Green Goblin who takes the pictures of Spider-Man, either trying to save his company, but also didn't want anything bad happening to Peter, who was one of his employees. I'd say some of the CGI in this movie hasn't really aged the best here. I mean, this was 2002, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. However, I can't help but think that Harry didn't have suspicions that Peter was Spider-Man. Yes, I know he doesn't really have that big of a role in this film compared to his father, but I mean, with MJ talking about how great Spider-Man is, and also Peter taking pictures of Spider-Man, you gotta kind of put the pieces together. I mean, personally, I think he would start to get some suspicions, which we will gradually see throughout the next few movies. Harry Osborn would definitely be one of the nitpicks I have with this film. I just don't get why he was trying to make a move on MJ, since he knew his best friend Peter had a crush on her. But to be fair, Peter was taking so long to make a move, but that doesn't really mean you should make a move on your best friend's love interest, just because he can't do it. I think this is what really put Harry and Peter's friendship at risk. As we know, during the museum trip, Harry tries to talk to MJ for Peter, but then I guess ends up catching feelings for her later on in the film. They also start to date, but it's kind of a weird chemistry between the two. Harry seems to be in love with her, but MJ isn't as interested. I don't know, this whole thing kind of felt like a dick move from Harry. MJ would actually start to catch feelings for Spider-Man, who saved her life twice. They even shared a kiss in the rain where she was kidnapped. She also felt a very strong connection to Peter, which we see throughout their conversations. Don't think she knew he was Spider-Man yet, but I feel like she kinda had that feeling, but didn't exactly know yet. At the end of the film, she shows that she really loves Peter and that she wants to be with him. However, Peter basically tells her that they can't be together, of course, as he has this big responsibility and doesn't want to be responsible if something bad happens to her. I mean, it's great character development from Peter, to be honest. He learned throughout the film what Uncle Ben told him.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Of course, he is Spider-Man and he has a responsibility to protect the city now. He really wants to protect the people he loves, even especially after Uncle Ben passing away. He doesn't want to lose anyone else like that again. But overall, I'd say this was a solid film to start off this trilogy, and a film I'm still very fond of. It definitely aged well in terms of storytelling and the dialogue. Maybe some of the CGI and cinematography hasn't aged the best, but definitely the storytelling is where it really shines. This first film generated $825 million at the box office, and ultimately was a huge success at the time. It might not seem like the craziest thing now, but back in 2002 this was something else. Sam Raimi definitely outdid himself for his first Spider-Man film, so I'll give him that. Of course, because of the ultimate success of this movie, they created a sequel shortly 2 years later after this one. Spider-Man 2 came out 2 years later in 2004. The movie starts with Peter struggling to balance his life as Spider-Man with his responsibilities as a college student and a part-time pizza delivery guy. His relationships with his friends and family are strained, especially with Mary Jane Watson, who is now a successful actress, and Harry Osborn, who is obsessed with avenging his father's death by Spider-Man. Peter's life takes a turn when he attends a demonstration by Dr. Otto Octavius, a brilliant scientist working on a fusion power project funded by Oscorp. The experiment goes horribly wrong, causing an explosion that kills Octavius' wife and fuses 4 mechanical tentacles to his spine, turning him into Dr. Octopus, or Doc Ock. The tentacles have a mind of their own, which influence Octavius' actions, making him more aggressive and dangerous. As Peter's stress increases, he begins to lose his powers, which leads him to question his role as Spider-Man. He eventually decides to give up being Spider-Man, and his life would start to somewhat improve, doing better in school and even would make time to make it to Mary Jane's play. However, later on in the film, crime in the city rises, and Peter feels guilty for abandoning his responsibilities. Meanwhile, Doc Ock needs more tritium to recreate his experiment, and he would approach Harry, who agrees to give it to him in exchange for capturing Spider-Man. He confronts Doc Ock on a train, leading to a spectacular fight. Peter has a scene where he tries to stop the train from falling off the bridge. Spider-Man manages to stop the train, but is captured by Doc Ock and delivered to Harry. When Harry unmasked Spider-Man, he would finally discover Peter was him all along. Harry is shocked, but Peter would ask him where to find Octavius so he can stop him from continuing his experiment. Peter confronts Octavius at his waterfront laboratory, where he is trying to restart his experiment. During the battle, Peter reveals his identity to Octavius and appeals to the good man he once was. Octavius regains control of his mind and sacrifices himself to destroy the fusion reactor and saving the city. In the end, Mary Jane realizes she wants to be with Peter despite the risks. On the day of her wedding, she would bail out last minute and leave her fiancé John Jameson at the altar. She then goes to Peter's apartment and they embrace, accepting the challenges that lie ahead together. The movie closes with Peter embracing his role as Spider-Man, still understanding that, with great power comes great responsibility, but his girlfriend Mary Jane, officially now, would be there to support him no matter what. I think this is definitely one of the best films out of the entire trilogy. Everything just improved so much from the first film. From the cinematography, the screenplay, the characters, the action scenes, you name it. I still think it holds up a lot more than the first when you're looking at it as an overall film. One of my favorite villains, Dr. Otto Octavius, was the main villain of this film. Just the design of the character and the effort put into the costume is something I have to respect, especially for 2004. In an exclusive behind-the-scenes clip, they will show that the claws of Doc Ock had to be moved by other people, especially considering CGI wasn't as advanced as it is now. I mean, they could have easily used CGI for the claws, but this was definitely the better direction, as this made everything look more real and natural. Of course, spoiler alert, in No Way Home, Dr. Octavius' claws use CGI, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but I do respect what they did with the claws in this movie. But to be fair, this was 2004, so CGI wasn't as advanced as it will become later on. MJ and Peter's relationship being more touched on in this film was interesting, considering the first one left off with Peter basically telling MJ that they can't be together. In the first film, Peter would learn about the responsibility of being Spider-Man, in which it's best for him and MJ not to be a couple as he doesn't want anything bad happening to her. However, one nitpick I kind of have is how MJ tried to guilt trip Peter by finding another man, John Jameson, and even getting married to him, almost. I don't know, it just seemed like it was a little toxic from her to rub it in his face. But I guess it's somewhat justifiable as Peter was a little bit in the wrong for not telling MJ the real truth throughout the film. And Peter's lies would catch up to him throughout the entire film, especially with how his life would start to fall apart. In the beginning of the film, Peter was struggling to figure out what he and MJ really were. He still loved her inside, but he just couldn't say it. However, I do like how they embrace each other at the end. It's a really great ending. But the toxicity from Mary Jane was something that kind of bothered me. And this would be kind of a problem in the next installment, which we will talk about shortly. Nonetheless, we finally get that happy ending that we were wanting to see in the first film. I actually think this is the only film in the trilogy to have somewhat of a happy ending. Another character I want to mention is Harry Osborn. James Franco definitely fits the role of Harry Osborn and does a great job also in this film. Harry and Peter were really shown to be close friends in the first film. In this film, their friendship would start to take a very downward spiral. Of course, Norman Osborn was killed by his own glider, which he wanted to kill Peter with. And Harry from that point on fully despised Spider-Man and wanted him dead to avenge his father. Peter and Harry's friendship would start to get sour throughout the film as Peter also wasn't 100% truthful to Harry about what really happened to his father. Eventually, Harry would find out Spider-Man was Peter all along when he took off the mask. I also did enjoy that flashback scene, or I guess callback to a vision of Peter talking to Uncle Ben about his current struggles. It was definitely nice to see Peter talking to Uncle Ben, albeit it was in his mind. And with that same car setting like in the first movie, but newly shot. The train scene was also very wholesome after Peter saved the New Yorkers' train from nearly going off the rails. The New Yorkers embracing Spider-Man and even sticking up for him when Doc Ock was trying to capture him too. It was a pretty nice thing to see. Also, this very scene was definitely one of my favorites, hands down, like this is just cinema. Throughout the film, we see that once everything started going wrong for Peter Parker, everything would start to go wrong for Spider-Man as well. With Spider-Man slowly losing his powers, showing also Peter would start to lose himself at the same time. Actually, the main theme of this movie is being true to yourself, and especially others, while also finding that right balance in your life. Peter actually has a scene where he opens up to Aunt May that he was somewhat responsible for Uncle Ben's death, showing him start to get more truthful and also most importantly taking responsibility. From fixing all of his life issues, Peter steadily would start to gain his powers back, and was even trying to fix and clear things with Mary Jane. Aside from the main story, just like the first film, the movie shared some iconic moments like Peter saying,
Pizza time.
Then this dude.
He stole that guy's pizza!
And of course Octavius saying,
Butterfingers.
This would also be the movie that would have that infamous scene of J. Jonah Jameson laughing at Peter, which turned into an iconic internet meme.
You serious?
That scene where Harry slapped Peter at the party was kinda neat. Basically Harry feeling like he was getting betrayed by Peter, and also Harry just being drunk and also feeling resentful of his best friend at that moment. Although in the movie, I found it kind of weird that Mary Jane would just ditch her wedding just to be with Peter at the end. I mean, yeah, it's cute and all, but like, it kind of felt a little toxic from her side. Just trying to get with this other guy to fuck with his feelings. I mean, Peter still loved her and they would embrace at the end. I like this little detail at the end where Mary Jane sees Peter swinging through the sky, then the movie ends with her having that face of, what did I get myself into? And of course, that's something that will get more explored on in the next film. I do like that final fight scene where Octavius would finally get control of his mind again, and would sink his experiment into the river so he can save the city. Octavius would sacrifice himself, showing that he wasn't really a bad guy and did have a good heart inside. I will say this movie definitely felt more human compared to the first. Like, you can just take all the superhero action stuff out, and this is just a cinematic masterpiece to watch in general. I mean, I'll give the first the benefit of the doubt. It was Sam Raimi's first time working on a Spider-Man film, and superhero films weren't really that common during this time. So writing a 100% perfect superhero adaptation film probably wouldn't have been possible at the time. What they came out with wasn't too bad, but I will say it's a good foundation. I mean, they did end up making a really great sequel that was arguably better than the first, and that's something I really appreciate. Definitely one of the best films out of this trilogy, and even one of my favorite movies overall. Now, with Spider-Man 2 being as great as it was, can the third one be able to top these two movies combined? Well... Now, Spider-Man 3 is definitely something else. I mean, firstly, it was released 3 years after the second, with the first and the two only having a 2-year gap. The movie begins with Peter Parker finally finding a balance between his life as Spider-Man and his relationship with Mary Jane Watson. Things are going great, he continues to save the city from danger. He has a healthier relationship with Mary Jane for the time being. He attends her shows, however, things weren't 100% great with him. Towards the end of the last movie, Harry would find out that Peter was Spider-Man all along, and Peter was the one responsible for his father's death. Because of this, Harry has a disdain for Peter, and eventually would want to get his revenge on him. Trouble soon arises when a meteorite carrying a symbiotic alien substance crashes near Peter while he's laying with Mary Jane on his web. The substance attaches itself to his scooter and later bonds with his Spider-Man suit, enhancing his powers but also implying his darker qualities and aggression. Harry would still seek revenge for his father's death and would eventually become the new Goblin and attacks Peter. During their battle, Harry is injured and suffers from temporary amnesia, basically forgetting his hatred towards Peter. MJ's character would also start to get a little more deep in this film. She would get fired from her leading role after receiving a flood of negative reviews on opening night. This would cause her to just be off mood, and would sort of start some conflicts with her and Peter, claiming that she wants him to care about what she wants instead of what he wants for once. During some event, fans would be praising Spider-Man for his heroic actions, saving Gwen Stacy from falling off a building. MJ would also be at this event, of course, to support her boyfriend, despite being in a troubled state. Spider-Man and Gwen would share a kiss as a way to celebrate. This is also the same day Peter was gonna actually propose to MJ at some fancy French restaurant. MJ confronts Peter about how he shared that kiss with Gwen when he was dressed up as Spider-Man, and then storms out of the restaurant before Peter would even propose to her. At the same time, Flynn Marko, an escaped convict, falls into a particle accelerator and is transformed into Sandman, a being with the ability to manipulate sand. Peter learns that Marko was a true killer of his Uncle Ben, which fuels his desire for vengeance. Peter's darker side would start to take over as the symbiote would attach itself to his body. Of course, there would be a scene where Peter would transform into Black Spider-Man. No, not that Black Spider-Man, silly! Peter would have a new Black Spider-Man suit and would eventually confront Sandman, trying to kill him, getting his sweet revenge. After this incident, there would be some fake news coming out about Spider-Man becoming a killer. Of course, Eddie Brock, a rival photographer at the Daily Bugle, would eventually get humiliated by Peter Parker for faking the image. He would lose his job after Peter would expose his photographs for being fake and obviously edited. From this moment, the symbiote would start to consume Peter, and this is where the iconic Bully Maguire character started to form. Peter would also share the scene of him beating the shit out of his best friend Harry Osborn after he made advances on Mary Jane. The effects of the symbiote would start to take a toll on Peter after he essentially crashed out at a music bar and tried to confront Mary Jane, who was also working there. Eddie Brock, who earlier got humiliated by Peter Parker, he goes to a church and prays to God that he would kill Peter Parker. At the same church, Peter, realizing the negative impact of the symbiote, removes the black suit. The symbiote then bonds with Eddie, transforming him into Venom. Of course, Venom would team up with Sandman to take down Spider-Man. They kidnap Mary Jane and use her as bait to lure Peter into a final confrontation. Peter seeks help from Harry, who initially refuses at first, but later has a change of heart after a conversation with his butler, who reveals the truth about his father's death. In the climatic battle, Spider-Man and the new Goblin fight together against Venom and Sandman. Harry sacrifices himself to save Peter from Venom's attack. With Harry's help, Peter manages to separate Eddie from the symbiote and uses a pumpkin bomb to destroy it. Eddie, unwilling to be separated from the symbiote, leaps him into the explosion and then he dies. Peter forgives Flynn Marko after learning that his involvement in Uncle Ben's death was accidental and was motivated by his desire to save his sick daughter. Marko, filled with remorse, dissipates into the wind. The movie ends with Peter and Mary Jane mourning Harry's death and reconciling, acknowledging the challenges they have faced and the love that still binds with them. This movie, while having its flaws, wasn't really all that bad. Sure, it's not the best out of the trilogy, but this movie definitely still had more emotions throughout it, just like the first two. Of course, the main focus of this movie was more on Peter's relationships with the people in his life, from his girlfriend Mary Jane, and of course his best friend Harry Osborn. Some of the main problems of this movie were the amount of subplots, and cramming both Sandman and Venom for the final battle. I do feel like they should have just stuck to one main villain, so everything didn't feel as confusing as it turned out. In Spider-Man 1, the main villain was Green Goblin, Spider-Man 2, Dr. Octavius, and now Spider-Man 3 we got 2 or 3 main villains. That's if you include Harry in the beginning of the film. I think it would have been very interesting to have Harry as this movie's main villain, just because this whole trilogy has been building up to this falling out of Peter and Harry's friendship. Harry wanted to avenge his father's loss since Spider-Man 1, and he was even told by his own father subconsciously to avenge him. And honestly, I personally feel like Spider-Man 3 should have been focused on more of that concept. It would have made for a way more interesting story, rather than just shoehorning Sandman and Venom. But speaking of Sandman, there's actually an editor's cut of this film that released in 2017, showing some deleted scenes of the film's original vision. There's one new scene shown in the editor's cut of Emma, Flint's wife, and his daughter Penny having a conversation about her father, and basically Emma telling Penny to not get her hopes up of seeing her dad again. But before they leave the park, Penny walks up to a sandcastle and sees a handprint, most likely Flint's. The scene would beautifully show the bond these two had way more, and I wish they did keep this scene in the film. It just really went to show that Sandman wasn't really that much of a bad guy, and he just wanted to help his daughter. I mean, honestly, if they kept the scene in the theatrical release, I think this would have fleshed out Flint's character a lot better. Actually, as I'm working on this video, I just found out about some of the deleted scenes and director's cut, and found them pretty interesting. I decided to just add this into the script last minute, as I feel like the scene would have worked better if it was in the final cut. If you guys want me to go more into the behind the scenes of these editor cuts, let me know in the comments below. But back to the movie, I did like what they did somewhat with Harry in this film, to an extent. The amnesia part was kind of questionable, just to make him a nothing character for a few moments, until he would regain his memory back. I think this was to include Sandman and Venom and focus on their villain arcs, yada yada. But that scene where Harry passed away was definitely one of the most impactful moments of the film. In the beginning of the film, we see Harry full of revenge, resenting his best friend Peter, to eventually learning that it wasn't really his fault, and would forgive and even sacrifice his own life, so he wouldn't lose his best friend, just like he lost his father. Definitely somewhat of a full circle moment in a way. When Norman died, and how far Harry's character has come throughout the entire trilogy. He risked his life for his own friend, and despite them having their issues, Harry deep inside has a good heart, and really loved and cared for his friends. Kind of made that line that he said in the hospital much more sense.
You have lovely friends.
My best friends. I'd give my life for them.
I honestly love the bittersweet ending for this movie. It was very sad and did kind of leave the trilogy on a lower note. However, I don't think this film is all that bad as people like to paint it. Obviously, I have a lot of nostalgia for the first two films, and prefer those over this in terms of storytelling. Just shoehorning Sandman and especially Venom at the end just kind of felt clunky, especially in the final cut. This film would also go into the whole Mary Jane and Peter having a complicated relationship once again. Obviously, the film starting on them living as a happy couple, to then things getting sour again, then breaking up, then kissing different people. Like, we haven't seen that before. Yeah, I don't think this relationship is really going to work out. Just put the fries in the bag, bro. One detail that this movie added was that there was a different guy that killed Uncle Ben. It apparently wasn't the guy with the gun robbing the bank, but of course revealed to be Flynn Marco, aka Sandman. Of course, towards the end of this movie, Flint tells the actual story on what happened, and that he didn't have any bad intentions compared to the other guy. He really just wanted to help his sick daughter. I do like how Peter would learn to forgive him at the end, and forgiveness would be one of the main themes in this film. Starting the movie seeking revenge, wanting to kill Flint, to then learning to forgive. Even Harry, before he died, learned to forgive Peter for what happened to his father, and would even help him in his battle against Sandman and Venom. That scene where Flint started to form as Sandman was a pretty beautiful looking scene, even for its time. The cinematography, as always, is peak, and even looked a lot more better here than the first two, somewhat. Also, the scene where the symbiote catches on to Peter, turning him into a dark suit Black Spider-Man was pretty cool. The Bully Maguire segments were quite enjoyable to watch. Of course, this Bully Maguire name is what the fans gave this version of Peter that is consumed by the symbiote. Especially Harry fighting that version of Peter was definitely a pretty nice fight scene too. The bar scene was a pretty funny watch too, just seeing Peter go crazy and fight with some guys at a bar, and even surprise Mary Jane was quite funny, but that slap scene was a little crazy though, can't lie. And well, surprisingly, the final battle between Sandman and Venom, despite having too many villains, was a fun watch. Just seeing Harry and Peter squashing their beef and becoming friends again to defeat these guys together was pretty wholesome. There's a lot to like about this movie, and I don't think it's as bad as people make it to be. It's definitely a mess, yes. But when you rewatch it over and over, you start to find new things to like from this film. I mean, hell, I'd even say Spider-Man 3 is 10 times better than The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But again, that's for a completely different video, if that ever happens. Spider-Man 3 would mark the end of the Sam Raimi trilogy, as the fourth would never get made. I mean, it's literally been 17 years. And they also had different universe Spider-Man films in between. Of course, spoiler alert, unless you've been living under a rock, you would know that Tobey Maguire would come back after 14 years to reprise his role as Spider-Man in the movie Spider-Man No Way Home. But again, if you haven't seen that film, I would suggest you to watch it. But I mean, if they somehow decide to make a fourth and continue where this trilogy left off, I'll definitely be there to watch it. But again, we'll just have to see what ultimately happens for the future of this franchise. And well, there's my review on these movies. Definitely was a blast making this video, especially a review on a trilogy of films I adored as a kid, and can still find enjoyment and new things to like from it today. If I were to rank this whole trilogy as a whole, I'd put number 3, Spider-Man 3, number 2, Spider-Man 1, and of course, at number 1 I'd have to put Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 is definitely one of my favorite movies out of this trilogy, and one of the best Spider-Man movies overall. 3 was definitely the weaker out of this whole trilogy, but still had some great moments. This trilogy as a whole, in my personal opinion, is one of the best superhero trilogies. Again, I know there's some people out there that are more fond of the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and even the Tom Holland saga, but I just feel like nothing beats the iconic Sam Raimi Spider-Man films in terms of storytelling and the effort they put into everything else. Maybe it's just out of pure nostalgia bias, but hey. This trilogy really gave us some of the most iconic memes and quotes that I don't really see that much from the Garfield, and to an extent the Tom Holland films. Depending on how well this video does, I would like to dive into those other Spider-Man movies and give my thoughts on them. If we can get this video to 100 likes, I'll definitely do a review on the 2 Amazing Spider-Man movies, so be sure to hit that like button, and also be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell to never miss out on new videos. Also, for all my new viewers, this channel does have memberships. If you guys want to help me create more quality content, please join so you can also get exclusive perks from this channel as well. Link is, as always, is at the very top of the description. But either way, I would suggest y'all to give this trilogy a watch if you haven't seen it. Or, if you have, definitely give it a rewatch to find new things to like about them. Anyway, that's my review on this trilogy. Let me know what you guys think of these films in the comments below. Also, if you want to suggest other movies for me to review, I'll be down to do that. And it might even give me a little break from discussing influencer boxing all the time. For my influencer boxing fans, don't worry. I'll still be somewhat making influencer boxing content. Maybe not as consistently as I used to, depending on where I want to take this channel in the future. In fact, I do actually plan on working on another Chronicles of Influencer Boxing video, possibly before the year ends. Not really going to spoil on who it is, but hopefully he'll be as memorable as the pound for pound champion, Bonesaw. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. More things to come for the future of this channel. As always, I'm Mega Shadow, signing out. Peace.